Racist cop slaps black woman. She destroys him publicly in just 4 minutes. It was supposed to be a quiet day in courtroom 3C of the Charleston County Courthouse, the kind of day where the only noise was the creak of wooden benches or the low hum of a printer struggling to spit out another batch of paperwork no one would read. Outside, the air was humid with the threat of a thunderstorm, and inside the mood was just as heavy. No one expected anything unusual, no protests, no cameras, no press, and certainly not her. Danielle Harris entered the courthouse through the side entrance wearing a light gray blazer over a black blouse, black slacks, and scuffed-up flats that had seen too many fights and never lost one. She walked alone, no security, no entourage, just a slim brown folder tucked under her arm and a calmness that made people around her sit up straighter without knowing why. She didn't come to be seen. She came because someone had called her the night before, an old law school colleague who whispered over the phone, "They're railroading a 15-year-old boy tomorrow. No guardian, no lawyer. It's buried." "You didn't hear this from me." Then they hung up. Danielle wasn't there as a congresswoman, not today. Not as a legal analyst or guest speaker. Today she was a black woman with a memory of her little brother bleeding in a holding cell, of a death labeled accidental restraint and a silence labeled procedural necessity. She had buried him with a head full of law books and a promise she never said aloud. "I'll never let the next one disappear like you." So she sat in the third row of the nearly empty courtroom, quiet, still, and watching. The boy, Micah Lewis, wasn't even in the room. He was being held in a side chamber, visible only through a small rectangular window in the wall. He sat there with a hoodie 2 sizes too big, cuffs hanging off his wrists, feet not touching the floor. No one sat next to him. No lawyer. No parent. Just a kid, waiting for someone to decide who he was allowed to become. On the other side of the courtroom, a tall white officer stood near the prosecution table. His posture was casual, but the tension in his fingers was obvious to anyone who knew how to look. Officer Travis Clay, badge number 3289. Known around Charleston for his efficiency, his discipline, and his ability to file a dozen reports before lunch, all sanitized, all spotless. When Clay spotted Danielle, something in his expression shifted. Not confusion, not curiosity. It was the kind of look men gave when they thought they were about to be challenged in a room they thought they owned. The kind of look that said, "Not here, not you." She met his gaze with silence. Unflinching, she didn't smirk, didn't flinch. She simply existed in a space that wasn't meant for people like her to exist quietly. That, more than anything, set him off. The judge entered. An older man, Judge Raymond Dixon, with a dusty voice and a habit of clearing his throat every few seconds like he was about to say something profound, but never did. "This is the preliminary hearing for the juvenile matter regarding Micah Lewis," he began, flipping through the paperwork as if reading it for the first time. That was when Travis Clay moved. He didn't speak, didn't ask for permission. He simply walked straight down the aisle between the benches, his boots echoing off the tile like warnings. Danielle didn't move. He stopped in front of her. For a second there was a strange, unnatural stillness. The kind that usually happens after something terrible. But here it came before. Then it happened. His hand flew faster than most could process. The sound of the slap was like a gunshot, sharp and sudden. Her head tilted slightly with the force of it, but she didn't fall. Her eyes didn't close. She simply turned her head back and looked at him. No words. No gasp, just that look, like glass. Like steel. The room froze. Even Judge Dixon, halfway through mouthing some procedural line, went completely still. The court clerk dropped her pen. No one moved. No one said a word. Except Officer Clay, whose breathing had grown louder, heavier. "Who do you think you are?" he growled, his voice low but shaking. "Sitting here like you own this place. Like you belong." Danielle slowly stood. It wasn't an act of defiance. It was something quieter, more terrifying. A calm elevation. Her back was straight. Her face was unreadable. But her eyes locked onto his like a hawk to a mouse, and that was the moment power shifted. It didn't take an outburst. No yelling, no threats, just 4 minutes of total, unbearable silence. Officer Clay took an instinctive step back. His hand, still red from the slap, hung stiff at his side. His face twitched, then hardened. But his eyes, they were searching for support. For justification, for control, he found none. Because Danielle Harris wasn't just standing there, she was watching. Not just him. The whole system, the judge, the prosecutor. The bailiff who hadn't moved, the court clerk who refused to meet her eyes, everyone who had made a life out of looking away at just the right moment. And now no one could look away. "Not yet," she said softly. It was the first thing she'd said since entering the room. 2 words, but they landed like a verdict, "Not yet." A storm was coming, not the kind you could track on radar, the kind that started with a slap and ended with a reckoning. By the time Danielle sat down again, Officer Clay had backed halfway to the wall. His voice, once laced with superiority, had vanished. The judge didn't resume the hearing. The room didn't return to normal, because everyone present knew nothing would ever be normal again. And somewhere behind that courtroom wall, a 15-year-old boy in handcuffs blinked for the first time in 10 minutes. As if something had shifted, as if maybe, finally, someone had walked in and seen him. No cameras captured that slap. But by the time the courthouse closed that evening, whispers had already spread. A woman got struck in open court, and the man who hit her left shaking. Danielle didn't report it. She didn't need to. Because something far more dangerous than outrage had been released. The truth, and she intended to use it. The courthouse smelled like stale coffee and history no one wanted to claim. After the slap, after the silence, no one quite knew what to do. Judge Dixon called for a recess without finishing his sentence. The bailiff escorted Officer Clay out with an awkward stiffness, as though unsure whether he was protecting or removing him. And Danielle? She simply walked out the front doors, not with defiance, but with the terrifying poise of someone who had already decided this wasn't over. The whispers had already started. By the time Danielle got to her car, a dark green Toyota Camry with a dent in the back left fender and no parking sticker, she'd counted 3 people pretending to tie their shoes just to glance at her. A courthouse janitor looked up from his mop and nodded slowly. A young woman on the courthouse steps pulled out her phone, not to record, but to text someone. Danielle knew what they were all feeling. They didn't know who she was. But they knew they'd seen something that shouldn't have happened, and someone who wasn't going to let it slide. She got into the car and sat still. Her face in the rearview mirror was calm, but her hands were trembling in her lap. Not with fear, with rage disguised as discipline. She had learned long ago that you never bring fury to a courtroom. You bring facts. You bring fire that knows how to burn quiet. She opened the manila folder on the passenger seat. Inside, a printout of an unofficial juvenile court schedule, typed, unsigned. Micah Lewis, age 15, arrested 2 nights ago. Charges: vandalism, resisting arrest, disruption of public peace, all blank charges. The kind you write when you don't have the truth, but you need a reason. She flipped the folder open to the timeline. Arrested at 8:14 p.m. Processed at the Juvenile Detention Center at 7:47 p.m. Danielle blinked. She reread it. Arrested after he was processed. She sat back in the seat, eyes tracing the numbers. A full 27-minute gap. This wasn't a typo. This was strategy. Someone had written the timeline backward to hide what actually happened, but they'd made a mistake. Nobody's that good at lying in perfect order. She picked up her phone, dialed the number she hadn't used in almost 2 years. "Travis," she said when the line connected, "you still have access to Charleston PD traffic cams?" The voice on the other end paused. Travis Moore, a former public defender turned investigator, had helped Danielle in the old days, back when her fights were about prison reform and not political headlines. "You know I'm not supposed to," he said, "but if you're calling me, I assume someone's dead or about to be." Danielle didn't smile. "Find me footage near the Savmore gas station on King Street between 7:30 and 8:30 3 nights ago," he whistled. "That's specific." "It's not a favor," she replied. "It's a kid's life." That night, in a dimly lit kitchen in a rented townhouse on the edge of Charleston, Danielle watched grainy traffic cam footage on an old laptop. The scene was simple. A boy, hood up, hands in his pockets, stood outside the gas station, sipping from a bottle of water. Then a patrol car pulled up. No siren, no warning. Just Officer Travis Clay stepping out, walking up, grabbing the boy's shoulder and pushing him to the ground. 9 seconds. No conversation. No chase, just contact and cuffs. Danielle exhaled slowly. No vandalism, no resistance, no cause. And yet, he was already in the system, already logged, already processed, already tagged as a risk. She replayed the footage. Paused, zoomed. The boy didn't even look up until the cuffs were on. His expression wasn't guilt or defiance. It was confusion. The kind you see in children who've been told to obey but never warned about arbitrary power. Danielle closed the laptop. She opened another file. Micah Lewis's intake record. At the bottom, a signature. Signed, legal counsel waived. Only it wasn't his signature. Not even close. She'd seen his handwriting from a scanned school permission slip. A 15-year-old boy doesn't sign like that. Doesn't give up his right to a lawyer with such perfectly formed cursive. It was forged. She stared at the document, her mind racing through every case she'd worked, every ghost of a kid who'd never made it out. Micah was just the latest name added to a long, bloody list. Then her phone buzzed, unknown number. She let it ring twice, then picked up, said nothing. A male voice, low and direct. "If you're smart, you'll walk away. The slap was the warning. The next one won't be public." The line went dead. Danielle stood up, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain aside just enough to see the quiet street. A black SUV sat parked across the intersection. No lights. No movement. She didn't need confirmation. She'd seen that dance before. She walked back to the table and picked up a photo of her younger brother, Jonas, age 17 when he was arrested for loitering outside his own school. 3 cracked ribs and a ruptured spleen later, he died in the hospital while the officer in charge was reassigned. No charges, no public record, just a note that read, "Incident handled administratively." That was the year Danielle changed. She left her job at the federal prosecutor's office, enrolled in civil rights law, and started building cases no one wanted to touch. Now she knew exactly what this was. It wasn't about Micah, or even the slap. It was about what that slap represented. The moment someone like Officer Clay realized someone like her wasn't going to flinch anymore. Danielle picked up the intake file again. She grabbed a red pen and circled the forged signature. Then she wrote 2 words across the page. Not accidental. She wasn't angry. She was ready. By morning, the slap had become legend. No official statement. No headline. No leaked footage. Just whispers. In courthouse corridors. In coffee shop corners. Even in the break room of Charleston PD. Everyone was talking about her. The black woman who didn't flinch. The one who didn't scream. The one who stood taller after being hit. Danielle Harris had made the system blink, and it hated her for it. She knew better than to trust silence. At 8:10 a.m., she arrived at the Charleston Police Department's administrative building, not through the front, but through the side entrance meant for visiting attorneys and social workers. She didn't carry a briefcase, just a messenger bag and purpose. "I'm here to review the internal records of Micah Lewis's arrest," she told the officer behind the glass partition. The woman squinted at her. "Are you his lawyer?" "No," Danielle said, "but I represent the public's right to oversight. And this is an emergency records access request filed under State Juvenile Transparency Law, subsection 402B. The officer blinked twice, unsure whether to argue or fetch a supervisor. Danielle slid a folded paper across the counter. "I'd prefer not to make this public. But if I have to file a motion through the City Council's Civil Review Committee, I'll do it in front of cameras. Your call." 10 minutes later, she was in a file review room, flipping through hard copies and scanning digital records on a dusty desktop monitor with outdated software. Micah's file was cleaner than it should have been. Too clean. She tapped through the logs. Arrested at 8:14 p.m. Processed at 7:47. Same discrepancy. The footage she'd secured from Travis had already been mysteriously deleted from the public archive system, but she had a copy saved on an encrypted drive. Then she noticed something strange. There was no body cam footage listed, not even an indication it had failed, just nothing. She checked the shift logs. Officer Travis Clay was marked as wearing a functioning camera at the time. That alone was enough to trigger a mandatory flag under state policy. Yet here, not even a line that said camera malfunction. It had been erased. She took a deep breath. Someone didn't just fudge a timeline. They'd rewritten reality. Back at her car, Danielle opened her phone. A text from a blocked number blinked onto the screen. "Meet me tonight, Grant's Books." 10 p.m. Don't bring anyone. She stared at it, didn't respond. Just memorized it, then deleted it. That evening, the back entrance to Grant's Books creaked open like it had been waiting. The old bookstore, long shut down and turned into a storage space, smelled like dust and old ink. Inside, a single lamp lit the far table. A young man sat hunched over, sweatshirt zipped to his throat, nervous fingers fiddling with a pen, his name tag still pinned crookedly to his chest. Moloch Rowe, junior records clerk. She'd seen him before in the archives, always moving like someone trying not to be noticed. But he had watched her that day in the courtroom. Danielle remembered his eyes, silent, calculating, afraid. "You came alone," he said, without looking up. "You said not to bring anyone," she replied, sliding into the chair across from him. He pulled a manila envelope from under the table, his hands trembling. "I could get fired for this." "Or worse." "Then don't hand it to me," she said softly. "Just talk." He opened the envelope anyway. Inside were photocopies of original arrest forms, versions she hadn't seen. Witness statements that contradicted the official timeline. A page from a digital log showing that body cam footage had been manually removed from the archive queue by a user with override credentials. Danielle leaned in. Who else knows? No one, Malik whispered. They don't even know I made copies. I work at night. They think I just file and go home. She studied the logs. One entry stood out. The user who accessed Micah's file the day after the arrest wasn't Clay. It was someone logged in under admin privileges, someone operating from within the chief's office. Danielle's stomach twisted. This wasn't Clay acting alone. Malik nodded. There's more. There's a unit they don't put in the org charts. They call it field adjustment. They handle problem kids. No official cases, just disappearances. Danielle said nothing for a moment. Then she leaned forward. You want to do something about this? Malik's eyes darted toward the door. I already did. I gave you this. She didn't press, didn't need to. What mattered was what she now had, proof. Not just of police misconduct, but of intentional deletion, internal tampering, and something far darker. A system built not to correct itself, but to protect those who dismantled others in silence. Back at her place, Danielle scanned the documents, secured the drive, and added Malik's logs to a growing investigation board she'd built in her garage. Red string linked names. Clay, a captain named Ellison, a deputy records officer, and now, through access logs, Chief Bennett Granger. One more connection and she'd have a straight line. The knock at her door came at 2:07 a.m. 3 short raps. She stood behind the door for a moment, silent, breathing slowly. A voice spoke through the wood, calm. Familiar. You're being watched, not just followed. Watched. Danielle opened the door just enough to see a man in a plain navy jacket, gray hair, no expression. No name. I know what you're doing, he said, and I'm not here to stop you. Then what do you want? I'm here to tell you this isn't just about Clay. You've stepped into a network, not a mistake, and when you pull one thread... He paused, looking over her shoulder at the board inside. The whole thing unravels. Including people you didn't expect to be part of it. She didn't blink. Like you? He almost smiled. Like me. Then he turned, walked away, and left her with a storm pressing against the walls of her house and a truth forming in her chest. She wasn't chasing justice. She was chasing a system that had already erased hundreds of names like Micah's and filed them under nothing to see. But this time someone was watching, and someone finally was ready to speak. The morning after the meeting at Grant's Books, Danielle stood in front of her bathroom mirror, brushing her teeth with one hand and staring at herself with the other. Her eyes were sharper now, as if her reflection knew the path ahead would demand more than just resilience. It would demand exposure. She had the first real piece, a whistleblower, Malik, with documents that proved intentional tampering. She had the video from Travis showing the unlawful arrest, and she had that name, Chief Bennett Granger, tied by login credentials to a system built to erase evidence. But none of that mattered if she couldn't prove the system was designed to operate this way, not just break once in a while. At 9:00 a.m., she walked into the office of attorney Elise Monroe, a seasoned civil rights litigator who had left federal service after refusing to defend a corrupt housing enforcement program. Elise greeted her with coffee and a smirk. I heard the slap made rounds in places even Twitter doesn't know about, Elise said. You're not just a woman anymore, Danielle. You're a threat. Danielle handed over the envelope. Here's why. This isn't just about Officer Clay or even the kid they arrested. This is structural. Look at the digital access logs, admin entries made from Granger's terminal. Look at the intake form, signature forged, and then the timeline backward. Elise flipped through the copies, her brow knitting deeper with each page. Where'd you get these? They came from someone who knows what happens when files go missing, Danielle replied. Someone who doesn't want to be missing next. I can bring in 2 forensic analysts. We'll verify timestamps, trace the access credentials, maybe even cross-reference with the city's internal audit records. But this, Elise looked up. This is bigger than a court motion. This is a playbook. Danielle leaned back. Exactly. The plan was simple, go public, but not yet. They needed more than one case. They needed a pattern. So Danielle went digging into the last 24 months of Charleston Police Department juvenile arrests. She pulled records flagged as nonviolent disruptions, procedural intake, and the most ambiguous one, temporary hold due to behavioral concern. All of them black kids, ages 10 to 17. Nearly all of them lacked legal counsel at the time of processing, and more than half were tied to the same officers. Not just Clay. 3 others, Sergeant Dana Whitaker, Officer James Ellison, and Patrol Lead Tyler Brooks. Danielle pinned their names onto her investigation board. Every one of them had a record with no complaints. That alone was suspicious. No one in law enforcement works 8 years with a spotless record unless the spots were never written down. She was still staring at the board when her phone buzzed. A new number, no caller ID. She answered with caution. Harris. A deep, older voice replied. I saw you meet Malik Rowe. Danielle didn't respond. The voice continued. I'm not warning you, I'm inviting you. If you want to see how deep this goes, you'll come to 14th and Pine. Service entrance, midnight. The line clicked off. Elise was furious when Danielle told her. This could be a trap. These people are already deleting footage and forging signatures. You show up alone, you may not walk back. Danielle shook her head. If I don't go, I'll never get the second level. We've seen the enforcement. I need to see the design. That night, just before midnight, Danielle parked 2 blocks away from 14th and Pine and walked. No weapons, no wire. Just her recorder app running silently in her pocket. The service entrance was marked with peeling paint. She knocked twice. The door opened a crack. A man in his late 50s stepped aside to let her in. He wore a blue janitor's jumpsuit. His face was lined, his eyes tired. His name tag read Ray. I've been inside this place longer than most cops stay on the job, Ray said as he led her down a narrow hallway. I used to think the reports were just lazy. Then I saw kids come in, get moved around, and suddenly the paperwork didn't match the names. He opened a locked file drawer in what looked like a storage closet. Inside were 2 battered folders. Names, he said. Not just Micah, dozens. They call them disruptors, internally flagged for preemptive field adjustments. Danielle opened one folder. A 13-year-old girl, school record excellent, no disciplinary issues. Police reports said she was seen acting erratic outside a pharmacy. The file marked her as potential high risk. Recommendation: detain, process, do not escalate, no guardian notification. No official charge. She looked up. What is this? Ray met her eyes. This is how they clear the streets before grant applications go in. You think it's about justice. It's about redevelopment. They mark the neighborhoods, then they mark the kids. Danielle's chest tightened. So, these kids are sacrificed to make neighborhoods look safer for investors? Ray nodded. Every name you see here was flagged a week before a housing announcement or a school board rezoning. He handed her one last envelope. Inside was a handwritten list. At the top, underlined, Rapid Intervention Unit. Clay, Whitaker, Ellison, Brooks. And one more name, Coordinator, Chief B. Granger. Danielle exhaled slowly. They built a machine that eats children and calls it policy. Ray locked the drawer and turned to her. "You didn't come here just to know. You came to stop it." Danielle nodded. Ray looked her in the eye. "Then don't wait. These kids don't have time." As she left the building, the streetlight flickered above her. A cold wind cut through the silence. She didn't flinch. Tomorrow, the world would start hearing the names that this system had worked so hard to erase, and they wouldn't just hear them. They'd have to answer for them. Danielle sat on the edge of her hotel bed, files spread across the floor like pieces of a broken mural. Names, timestamps, forged signatures, redacted reports. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as her eyes shifted from one photograph to another, each of them a kid, a face, a life. And then her phone lit up with a text. No name. Just a number and 5 words. "You're not invisible anymore, Jefferson." She stared at it for a moment, heart beating slower now, not faster. Fear didn't live in her the same way it used to, not since the courtroom, not since the slap. That moment had burned away the part of her that played safe. She texted back 3 words. "I never was." Across the city, at the offices of the Charleston Civil Review Council, Elise Monroe was wrapping up her own war. Her meeting with a federal judge had gone better than expected, and they had received preliminary approval for a motion to protect Danielle's evidence under whistleblower privilege. But they both knew legal protection was only one part of the puzzle. "What now?" Elise asked over a burner call as she walked through the quiet parking garage under her building. Danielle's voice came in steady. "Now we make it undeniable." The following morning, Danielle walked into the Charleston Public Records office, bypassing the front desk with a casual nod. The clerk, an older white woman named Frances, who had seen a dozen scandals come and go, handed Danielle a cardboard box without a word. Inside, city budget reports, surveillance contracts, and field coordination memos. At the bottom of the box was what Danielle had been hoping for. A 2018 directive from Chief Bennett Granger outlining a high-alert youth monitoring initiative. It used clinical terms and risk assessment language, but between the lines it read like a strategy manual for preemptive racial profiling. She scanned the document and froze at one line near the bottom. All field observations of flagged individuals must be processed through special review, Unit Alpha, sign-off, BG. Danielle whispered, Unit Alpha, not Rapid Intervention, Unit Alpha. Back at her hotel, she pulled up Ray's list of names. At the top, Granger, then Clay, Whitaker, Ellison, Brooks. But now, 2 more names came up. Ones she hadn't seen before. Officer Lena Sharp and Data Coordinator Miguel Rollins. She cross-referenced their patrol zones with past arrests. It fit. These were the watchers, the handlers, the ones who didn't make the arrest but coordinated who should be arrested. They didn't touch the victims, but they wrote the algorithm that made it happen. The deeper Danielle dug, the more she realized this wasn't just a culture of silence. It was a machine of silence, designed, calibrated, and run with bureaucratic perfection. She needed to go public, but this time not through a press release or legal motion. She needed to show the people what had been done in their name. At 6:00 p.m. the next day, Danielle arrived at a modest community center in North Charleston. Word had already spread. Over 100 people filled the folding chairs in the hall. Parents, teachers, students, even a few off-duty officers standing quietly near the back, unsure of which side they were on yet. Danielle stepped onto the small stage with no microphone. Just a projector and a stack of manila folders. She didn't start with speeches. She started with names. Micah Jones, age 15, Detained without legal counsel. Filed under school disruption. No charges. Kendra Lee, age 13. Labeled non-compliant. Removed from her home during a housing inspection. Isaiah Fulton, age 16, arrested for lingering. No evidence, held for 12 hours. Then she showed the reports. The exact same phrases in all of them. Subject demonstrated evasive behavior. Potential for disorder. Guardian contact not verified. Then she projected the internal memo, Unit Alpha, Special Review. This, Danielle said, her voice rising slightly, is not incompetence. This is intentional. This is a system that punishes you for existing while black in the wrong zip code. From the back a woman stood. Oh. Danielle recognized her from a previous visit. Tasha Bell. My son was one of them, Tasha said. They told me he resisted, but they never told me where they took him. For 2 days, the room tensed. Danielle responded softly. Do you want to see the file they wrote about him? Tasha nodded. Danielle pulled it from the stack and handed it down the row of people until it reached her hands. Tasha unfolded the report and read the first line aloud. Subject displayed combative posture. Her voice cracked. My son is 8. He still sleeps with a nightlight. Danielle let the silence sit. Then she said, We will no longer allow them to write these stories for us. Tonight, we take the pen back. She handed out blank index cards. Write their names, she said. Your sons, your daughters. Your neighbors, your students. Write down what they took. And tomorrow, we tell the world what they tried to erase. The next morning, those cards lined the entrance to City Hall. Dozens, then hundreds. Each with a name, an age, and a simple message. We remember. It took 2 hours before city officials issued a response, a formal review. A promise to evaluate, but Danielle wasn't waiting. That afternoon, she launched a live stream called Erased, The Children Charleston Forgot. No edits. No music, just her and the files flipping through them one by one. At the 30-minute mark, she paused. They slapped me in that courtroom because I didn't belong. They wanted me out of their way, but what they didn't realize was that I wasn't alone. She looked directly into the camera. Now they'll have to answer not just to me, but to all of us. Within hours, the stream passed 500,000 views. By midnight, someone posted a copy of the Unit Alpha memo on Reddit. An anonymous caption read, Granger built the cage. She's lighting it on fire. Danielle didn't celebrate. She didn't sleep. She wrote 3 words on her bathroom mirror that night. Next, the reckoning. The air inside the federal courthouse in Columbia, South Carolina, felt heavier than usual. Danielle's heels tapped slowly across the marble floor as she walked toward the chamber where the emergency hearing was scheduled. Outside, local media vans crowded the block. But she didn't look at them. She had one focus now: exposure and consequence. Not just for Officer Clay, but for the entire machine he had helped keep hidden. This hearing wasn't about her, not anymore. Inside, rows of observers whispered as she entered. A few heads turned, a few hands reached for their phones. On the opposite side of the chamber, she spotted Bennett Granger seated next to 2 lawyers in tailored navy suits. His face was unreadable, but his body gave him away. Rigid posture, clenched jaw, fingers wrapped too tightly around a pen. Danielle sat silently at her table, Elise Monroe on one side, and Terrence Qualls, a veteran civil rights attorney, on the other. As they waited, the judge entered, a stern, sharp-eyed woman named Judge Yvonne Keller. Keller opened the session bluntly. We are here to address multiple allegations regarding procedural misconduct, falsification of legal records, unauthorized surveillance of minors, and coordinated institutional cover-ups involving the Charleston Police Department's Rapid Intervention Task Force and its affiliates. There was no ceremony, no indulgence. Danielle stood when prompted. "Your Honor, the evidence submitted details a systemic violation of constitutional rights and the orchestration of false legal documentation targeting minors of color. We are not pursuing this for compensation. We are pursuing this to protect lives that the system deemed expendable." Judge Keller nodded once. "Understood. Proceed." Danielle clicked a remote. The screen behind her lit up. A spreadsheet populated with arrest records, not just names. Patterns. 73 minors detained with no attorney. 52 lacked guardian contact. 44 were held in facilities with no documentation of medical evaluation. A voice from the defense side interrupted. "Your Honor, the defense would like to question the authenticity of these documents. Most appear to have been accessed without warrant." Keller's gaze sharpened. "Are you suggesting the documents are falsified?" The lawyer paused. "We're suggesting they were accessed through improper means, possibly compromising their chain of custody." Terrence stood. "If I may, Your Honor." The chain of custody was preserved. Each document was encrypted, time-stamped, and verified through independent data recovery experts. Keller turned back to Danielle. "Do you have corroboration?" Danielle didn't answer with words. She played the next clip. It was audio, grainy, but clear enough. "Just flag them for review," a male voice said. "We don't need to arrest unless they give us a reason. If they walk away, that's good enough to classify." It was Granger's voice. Danielle waited for a reaction. Granger didn't blink, but the people behind him did. One of his aides shifted in his seat. Another leaned forward like the floor beneath him might crack. Danielle turned toward the judge. That clip was recovered from an internal server labeled meetingconf119.mp3. Cross-checked with IP logs from the Charleston Police Data Hub. Granger's device ID was active during the time of the recording. Granger stood. "That audio is incomplete, out of context. I was discussing public safety measures, not targeting youth." Judge Keller raised her hand. "You will have time to respond, Mr. Granger. For now, sit down." The silence that followed was brutal. It wasn't just tension, it was exposure. Danielle stepped forward again. "I'd now like to introduce a witness. Someone whose involvement in the record-keeping process directly implicates the named officers and officials." The side door opened. Malik Rowe entered slowly, his hands trembling slightly, a manila folder under his arm. Whispers erupted in the courtroom. Granger's eyes locked onto him, jaw twitching. Malik took the stand. He looked at Danielle for a moment before speaking. "My name is Malik Rowe. I worked in the Digital Records Department at the Charleston Police Department. I was instructed, repeatedly, to adjust time logs, redact names, and categorize youth interactions under non-criminal codes to avoid paper trails." "By whom?" Keller asked directly. Malik inhaled. "Officer Clay, Officer Lena Sharp." "Supervisor Granger, did you ever receive direct orders?" "Not on paper, but always verbally, and the pattern was the same every time. If a black minor was picked up near a flagged zone, the report was edited, always the same line. Disruptive presence, intervention required, even if the kid was just walking home." Danielle approached with another document. This is one of the unredacted reports recovered from the system. Note the timestamp of arrest and compare it to the footage from a local bodega. The screen showed a grainy video of a boy standing at a corner drinking a soda. Time code 4:12 p.m. The arrest report said 4:53 p.m., resisting arrest. "He wasn't resisting," Danielle said. "He didn't even move." Granger stood again. "Your Honor, we're here for a procedural hearing, not a public trial by media." Judge Keller's gavel slammed once. "This is your final warning, Mr. Granger." Danielle walked back to her table and sat down. She was done speaking for now. Because the silence in the room said more than any argument could. For the next 30 minutes, file after file was reviewed, each one a reflection of the same mechanism. The same language, the same omissions, and in every one, the implication was clear. This wasn't a department that made mistakes. It was a department that planned outcomes. By the end of the hearing, the judge ordered a formal federal investigation into the Charleston Police Department, an immediate suspension of Officer Clay pending trial, and a subpoena for Granger's personal digital communications. But none of them celebrated, because this wasn't the end. It was only the first crack in the foundation. Outside the courthouse, Danielle stood on the steps surrounded by reporters. She raised her voice not to deliver a speech, but to issue a warning. To every system built on hiding truth, understand this. If it takes me 4 minutes to destroy a man who struck me, imagine what I can do with 4 months of your lies. We're not scared. We're not done. And we are not going away. That night, a new clip went viral. It wasn't from a news network. It was a cell phone video. Danielle in front of the courthouse, sunlight behind her, voice calm but firm. And the caption read, "She didn't shout. She didn't run. She just exposed them with receipts." The city of Charleston didn't sleep easy that night. Because justice had a name now, and she wasn't hiding anymore. Danielle's name was no longer confined to whispers in government halls or murmurs behind court doors. By now it was shouted through school hallways, posted in break rooms, debated in local diners, and dissected in online forums. She wasn't just a woman anymore. She had become a symbol, and for many a threat. The Charleston courthouse had barely caught its breath from the last hearing when a new storm hit. Not a direct counterattack, but something darker, more insidious. That morning, Danielle received a certified letter from the South Carolina State Prosecutor's Office. It wasn't a summons, it was a charge: abuse of position, misuse of confidential data. Incitement of unauthorized public activism. Elise read it once, then a second time. "They're flipping the script," she said, dropping the pages on the table. Danielle stood at the window of the small office they'd been using, watching traffic hum past the morning rain. "They want the people to think I'm the one breaking the law now. That exposing the truth makes me dangerous." Elise crossed her arms. "And it's working. Look at the media. Half the stations are already running stories questioning your credibility." Danielle turned. "Then we shift the battleground." That afternoon, Danielle went live on a grassroots media platform. No filters, no flashy production, just a folding chair, a white wall, and a camera. Her voice was calm, her eyes steady. "They want to scare you with process," she said. "To make you believe that digging up truth is a crime, that questioning authority is rebellion. But ask yourself, if I fabricated this, why are they charging me instead of disproving what I found?" She then detailed piece by piece how she had received the files, how each witness approached her voluntarily, and how every document had been archived by third-party verification. "It's not about me anymore," she said. "It's about how far a system will go to silence the people who refuse to be erased." The video spread faster than any formal press statement could. Students began printing her quotes on flyers. Parents discussed her words during PTA meetings. Community churches read her statement aloud during Sunday services, but not everyone was celebrating. That same night, a familiar number flashed on Danielle's phone. She hesitated before answering. "You're still standing?" the voice asked. I am, she replied, already knowing who it was. Lamar Hensley, former internal affairs officer and one of the early enablers of the system she was dismantling. I've got one more name, he said, but if I give it to you, you'll be hunted harder than ever. Danielle's voice didn't waver. I'm already being hunted. What's the name? He paused. Then he said it. Deputy Director Alan Riggs. Danielle blinked. Riggs? He signed off on the education oversight contracts. Exactly, and guess what? He's the one who authorized the behavioral surveillance programs you exposed. She sat down slowly. Why him? Why now? Because he's cutting ties. Shredding memos, disabling backup servers. Danielle stood. Then we need to hit before he disappears into the shadows again. The next morning, Elise and Danielle filed a federal injunction to preserve all digital communication logs tied to the Urban Safety and Behavior Oversight Initiative, Riggs's baby project. At the same time, a sealed testimony from Malik Rowe was delivered to the Inspector General detailing how Riggs had personally ordered deletions of flagged interactions with minors. As the legal team scrambled behind the scenes, Danielle received a visit from someone unexpected, Brianna Keller, a junior officer who once worked under Clay. Why are you here? Danielle asked. Brianna looked like she hadn't slept in days. I was on patrol the night the girl in South Park was taken, she said. Jamira Fields. I saw what happened. I didn't stop it, but I wrote down everything, and I still have the original notes. Danielle stared at her. Why now? Because the people I trusted are burning down the house to hide what they've done, and I don't want to be inside when it collapses. Danielle reached for her bag. Then sit down. We need your voice. This time, we don't fight the fire alone. Brianna handed over the notebook. Its pages were stained with old ink and sweaty fingerprints, but each one was a confession. A brick pulled from the foundation of the cover-up. Within 48 hours, Danielle's team compiled a new exhibit for the pending case, testimony from Brianna, digital logs from Riggs's system, video stills from Jamira's neighborhood, and a timeline of deleted files recovered through data forensics. But the twist came when Danielle's name appeared on another document, one leaked to the press before it ever reached her. A new internal motion filed by the city council to evaluate the legality of her actions and review her conduct as an elected official. They're not trying to beat you in court, Elise said. They're trying to exile you politically, make you radioactive. Danielle leaned forward. Then I give them a reaction they can't script. The next day, she showed up at a televised community town hall, uninvited. Cameras swiveled, council members stiffened. She stepped to the front and said calmly, You've charged me with exposing what you tried to hide. You say I overstepped, but I didn't step over anything. I stepped into what you let rot in silence, and if you want me gone, I won't fight you. But you'll have to say it to the faces of every person whose name you buried under paperwork and lies. Behind her, the doors opened. One by one, former victims and their families entered. Troy, Kendra, Micah, Jamira. Each one held a file. No yelling, no chanting, just presence. Just proof. And for the first time since the entire battle began, the city council said nothing. Because the people were no longer waiting to be spoken for. They had become the voice, and no charge, no headline, no motion could silence them now. By the time the federal hearing convened in Charleston, the city wasn't just watching, it was holding its breath. Streets once silent now buzzed with anticipation. News vans lined the courthouse like spectators before a reckoning. The name Danielle West wasn't just attached to a file number anymore. It had become a movement. Danielle didn't walk into the courthouse flanked by high-powered attorneys. She entered with Elise Choi, Malik Rowe, and Brianna Keller, people once silenced, now choosing to stand tall. Behind them came a wave. Micah Bell in a crisp white shirt, Kendra Moss leaning on crutches, Troy Bennett with his chin up, and Jamira Fields holding her grandmother's hand. 27 individuals, each one representing a page the system had tried to erase. The courtroom itself felt colder than usual, not because of the AC, but because the walls themselves seemed to resist what was about to happen. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman with a no-nonsense tone, opened proceedings. Ms. West, this court has reviewed your complaint against the Charleston Police Department, the City Oversight Council, and various named individuals. What remedy are you seeking? Danielle didn't approach the podium. Instead, she remained seated, her voice steady. I'm not here to seek money. I'm not here to settle. I'm here so that when a child is pulled from the sidewalk without cause, we can no longer pretend it's a paperwork glitch. I want their names restored, their records cleared, their stories recognized. I want every officer who signed off on these cover-ups to be investigated and held accountable. I want the system to stop acting like silence is safety. The judge studied her for a long beat. And if this court finds cause? She asked. Danielle's answer came without hesitation. Then the public will finally know they were never crazy to feel afraid. That something was wrong, and someone finally said it. It wasn't just the courtroom that held its breath. Across the city, thousands were watching via live stream, in barbershops, in school cafeterias, on phones held quietly beneath desks. The people weren't watching a trial. They were watching their reflection. The first exhibit was presented by Elise, a map of system-wide arrests with altered timestamps. Red dots bloomed across the screen like a virus. The judge leaned forward. This data has been cross-validated? Malik nodded from the stand. I was the data clerk. I was told to normalize inconsistencies, but they weren't errors, they were tactics. Brianna testified next. She described Jamira's arrest in detail, including the internal orders to withhold guardian notification. I thought I was keeping the peace, she said, eyes damp, but I was just keeping the machine quiet. Then came the recordings, audio clips of senior officials using phrases like social blind spots, uncomfortable youth patterns, and pre-incident deterrence, terms that meant nothing in public. But everything in execution, Danielle stood again. This is not just misconduct. It's policy by another name. The city's attorney tried to strike back. There's no clear evidence of a written mandate to target minorities, he argued. Danielle held up a blank sheet. You don't need a written mandate when everyone knows the script. The twist came not from a new revelation, but from the judge herself. Counsel, I've reviewed these records personally. In my 22 years, I've never seen such consistent procedural mimicry across so many unrelated cases. Either your department has an unspoken playbook, or someone's been lying with a very steady hand. The silence was thicker than ever. Danielle felt it. The ground had shifted. Then the judge turned to her. You said you weren't here to seek punishment, but justice sometimes requires consequence. What do you believe that looks like? Danielle scanned the room. Her eyes met the 27 faces that had once been called troublemakers, liars, ghost entries in a digital system. Now they sat as living truth. I want every child's record scrubbed clean, every officer who signed a false report suspended pending full investigation, every administrator who authorized these methods to be named publicly. I want this hearing on record, archived, and shown in every police academy in this state. And I want a new law introduced, one that bans behavioral surveillance of minors without court oversight. And you? The judge asked softly. What do you want, personally? Danielle paused, then smiled. I want one more chair in the room, for the next kid who thinks no one's listening. The judge didn't bang a gavel. She simply nodded. This court will deliberate, but understand, justice has already begun. That night, the ruling hadn't yet arrived. But something else did. A video, a grainy clip of Officer Clay, the same man who slapped Danielle, being escorted out of Charleston PD by Internal Affairs. No uniform, no salute. Just the look of a man who'd finally realized his badge wasn't a shield anymore. Danielle sat in her quiet office when the clip went viral. She didn't smile, she didn't celebrate. She opened her laptop and typed, "This story is not about me. It's about who we choose to believe. It's about what happens when we stop waiting for justice and start becoming it." To every voice that was silenced, speak. To every name that was buried, rise. The system didn't fall apart. It got seen, and now it has no place to hide. She hit send. The message spread like wildfire. A new hashtag trended. #not erased. In the days that followed, local councils across the state launched reviews. Dozens of pending charges against minors were dropped. An independent civilian board was formed to oversee school-based policing. And at the Jefferson Community Law Room, the front door had to be propped open because so many people were showing up to learn how to protect their rights. The final twist? Danielle never ran for re-election. She didn't need the title anymore. She had something stronger, truth. And a city that, finally, wasn't afraid to hear it. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you feel seen, angry, inspired, or ready, don't let it end here. Share it. Talk about it. Ask the questions they don't want you to ask. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that speak for the unheard. Because silence protects power, and truth belongs to all of us.